I'm Pawel Wojs, I'm the art director on Free Kingdoms.
I'm Attila Mohácsi, I'm the lead game designer. For example, like one thing that actually Web is quite famous about it is the repeating crossbow guys that we have added into the game. That yes, it was named after Zsigaliang in some sources. But yes, so that's one of the few things that we added. For example, that it's so trademark of the era, and the other thing is the G weapons that they developed for this time period by now, and it's like an interesting weapon that's really unique to China. It's like pretty much a spear with a hook on it. Yeah. So that's also there, like lots of
brutally effective spear.
It's brutally effective. So like these things were there. Like the other things that we were trying to incorporate is like how formations were working, like unit level formations mostly. So for example, you will be able to see like we have created a couple of unique formations that we have done ever before, like turtles and circle formations.
Yeah. The Chinese had their very own kind of testudo essentially, right? And they have circle formation, square, hollowed out square, so quite a few really cool formations that you could. Obviously, if you have a strategist, you could employ these formations, or a specific item. Some items grant you the ability to use formations even without a strategist, because the items you find throughout the game are far more powerful than they've ever been before. One of them, for example, is the Art of War, which if you find this, and you could find it either by capturing it from an enemy that had it, or through trade, for example, in diplomacy, grants you an extra army and several formations that you could use, amongst other things. So there's a lot of cool items that give you some cool things. Yeah.
Yes, we have a couple of legendary items in the game that are quite powerful. one you might see is like Guan Yu's weapon.
Yeah, definitely.
Guan Yu's weapon, the green crescent blade. Yeah, it's on the concept as well.
Yeah. So we researched quite a lot. Basically, we found quite a few historical layouts that we then used to inform the layout of our cities. They were quite specific, north, south, east, west kind of avenue, very specific orientations of where which way the city should face. So we kind of tried to incorporate that as much as we could to our designs. Not that much is known about the specific period. I think the most accurate architectural references were kind of Han period clay models essentially found in burial chambers. So, but yeah, we as always, we try to do as much as we can to research the best.
We have like an epic book about like this big, this thick about like this dynasty settlement design, and it's like how you make the perfect settlement as far as it was planned to be.
One of our layouts is literally that, the model Han settlement, how the guidebook tells you to construct a settlement. One of our layouts is very much that. Well, it's what we try to incorporate with, we've spoken about this before, but this kind of layered defense where you defend the walls and then you kind of fight your way back to a more defended center with these clear kind of avenues leading you to that center, but very well defended with towers. So there's a very much like peeling back onion kind of layer of defense.
And all the other streets are like much narrower. It's like that's easier to defend as well. Or you go down the main avenue, but that's, as you were saying, it's very well defended.
That's one of the changes, and weapons as well.
Weapons as well. So we did a couple of changes because for romance mode, we wanted to be having these all larger than life characters represented to be true to the Romance of the Three Kingdoms novel. But when we were looking at it, like it went far away from the history. So we were saying that like we have to deliver this as a historical game, as accurate as we can. So one of the things that we changed, like the chainmail, it's on characters, it's on mounts as well. Just remove it and said like it's leather. And the weapons that you mentioned as well, like, there are references of huge weapons which you put in.
Some that we haven't even included in romance,
like 9 feet long,
9 feet long spears and things like that. Which great, but a little bit,
a little bit too much. But even like the ones that were like not historical, we just decided to change it for the historical moves. Even some weapons are different because they're just not authentic.
So that's quite a subtle change, right? The major difference is the battlefield. Essentially the impact of generals, the impact of characters on the battlefield. In Romance, it's very much about these legendary characters, these pawns, moving them, the strategy you employ with those at the focus, at the forefront, at the front of your battle. Whereas for Records, it's more about your individual units, protecting your commanders, and playing out the tactics of a more traditional historical total war game. We very much approached it on its own merit and in just with the want to recreate China as best we could. You know, we obviously a lot of the artists came onto the team having worked on Warhammer, so they took took on board a lot of the skills and things they learned along the way with Warhammer. But what we wanted to do is do something that we looked at a lot of other games, and we were quite surprised as to a lot of games set in China didn't really bring justice to the Chinese environment. That was one of my biggest pet peeves when I looked at other games, and I looked at China, and a lot of them just literally a satellite kind of representation of the terrain. So I really wanted to push the beauty and kind of natural diversity of the of China, because it is amazing. So we picked these kind of archetypical kind of areas and wanted to expand on them. So some kind of tropey environments that are present in China might be isolated to a small area, but we kind of just expanded it to fill more of the space, just to celebrate the beauty of those environments, as well as calling out. I mean, we call out a lot of areas of interest, which you might see these kind of mystical mountains and things like the Yellow River and these kind of natural landmarks that kind of are present throughout the campaign map. We just really wanted to celebrate them and just draw attention to them. There are a few there, dotted along the campaign with a little note telling you what it is. So, yeah. So you can essentially explore China as you're playing through the campaign.
Yeah. Oh, we kind of like to do it as like a historical title. We like to tell historical information about geography, even in that case, like what was like an important landmark at the time.
Yeah. That's great. It's essentially, as we talked about, it's this kind of underlying framework, this kind of design philosophy that we applied to the game, and it kind of underpins everything. It's not this kind of in-your-face prescribed kind of thing, but it's something that kind of combines everything in the game, and everything is categorized. It's a philosophy where the ancient Chinese tried to categorize everything into five. We have 5 seasons, for example. Everything fits into this kind of framework.
Yes, pretty much how we looked at it is like this is an overarching concept for us. So you will see it like in buildings, units, heroes. And it's also like helping for people to just get easy into the game, because like if you get this very high level concept that a fire general, for example, that was mentioned in the presentation, is very good, for example, for military buildings. You see like the military buildings are red as well, so you can make that conclusion very quickly, that like red, it's fine. But it has an immense depth. It's more like than just a rock, paper, scissors type of approach. The Chinese made this like supporting concept as well. So for example, like
wood supports fire. So there's this kind of interlinking and kind of crossover. Each element supports another element and destroys another. So you've got this almost pentagram of relationships, which is why, for example, some wood characters will have some water skills or water-based skills or attributes. We have the attribute system where each character is made up of 5 attributes. Certain characters are strong in instinct. They have the fire, the vanguards. The strategists have got the strong water attribute. Some, like Cao Cao, are anomalies where they have multiple strengths because they're legendary.
Like a simple example would be like, for example, the strategists are being in all the range units, but they also support the spears that are I'm holding the line, and from that safe front line we can just safely fire from behind. And this went through like all the game, including buildings, how they synergize together. Again, the heroes, how they work very well together.
So it's a nice this framework, it's almost subconscious, subliminal. You'll come to see it and know it as you're playing and progressing through the game, and it'll become apparent to you as you're playing. So it's not, you know, you can choose to delve into that level of depth from the outset, or you can just literally just, you know, play your way through the game and have these things revealed to you and become to understand how it works. Use color to reinforce these relationships, you know, where your strategists are blue, you know, the skills kind of reflect that color as well. You've got the buildings that you construct, your trade and port buildings are blue in color with a blue tinted roof. On the battlefield, the military districts predominantly red, you know, so you have these colors kind of reinforced throughout the experience, as well as obviously, yeah, in the characters.
I can't really think of any sort of stretch game that's done something similar.
We like to go all in when we
Yes,
when we
definitely.
you know, when we research a title, we approach a new culture and their history. We try and get everything we can from that and somehow represent it in the game. If a philosophy like this is so important to a culture, we try and find a way to incorporate it, because we feel it's almost our duty as these you know, developers of these historical games to actually try and get that in as much as we can.
Yeah, for example, like the whole events that's happening, in many cases they're explaining it like it's just a shift between elements, even in history as well. So we were like, if it's that embedded into this period and the culture itself, like, why not to bring it a little bit forefront? And we are genuinely a historical game, so we like to tell stories about history and educate people about things. So if anyone will just find it, read after it, we will see like all these depths, but it was different levels of meanings we have in the game for and history as well.
But it's
how
also
it happened.
Yeah, and it's also a fine balance, right? Because we didn't want to gamify it. We didn't want this kind of like fire, earth, water. You know, we still wanted to maintain that kind of historical authenticity, that kind of the essence of a total war game, where it's so much. It shouldn't feel too gamey. It should have this feeling of you know, almost
Forced.
Yeah,
it's like we didn't want to do that.
We don't
like
want to force it into the player's faces. That's why it's this kind of this thing, as it was in the philosophy. Everything falls into these five, but it's kind of everywhere. It's like it's a tapestry. It's not in your face kind of traffic lights. Well, in some cases it is, but you know.
But it's not in your face.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, the first thing we wanted to do is when we wanted to use the kind of really illustrative 2D characters. So we wanted to, when going from previous games 3D porthole characters in the UI, we were going to 2D characters. We wanted to have like a underlying ink to kind of integrate everything. You know, we wanted to have. We also wanted to go from a modern kind of minimalist look. So we wanted to have, and to integrate all of this 2D artwork, we needed ink. So we had to develop our own ink shader, essentially, which is a material that basically flows and grows with the UI panels, as you've seen. And we actually spent several weeks, maybe a couple of months in pre-production doing ink tests. We actually filmed ourselves. We set up cameras, got lots of ink, different types of ink, different consistencies, different water mixtures, and just painted and captured.
Just even dropped and see how it flows.
Yeah. So a lot of the ink that you see in the game, a lot of the panels and the ink that you see, is an ink shader that's actually using flow maps that were derived from our ink tests and masks that were derived from our actual real ink tests, which is quite cool. I think for me, I'll be quick because we're running out of time. But yeah, for me, the characters, the way characters play, the fact that characters aren't tied to factions, they move around. Affects, you know, the post-faction leader with his faction destroyed that survived can still join your faction if your relationship is positive. So I think for me, that's the most interesting thing.
For me, it's like character persistence, definitely. That's like characters leaving, joining your faction based on the relationship and the effect on this of diplomacy, that you can build up relationship with other factions. You feel that you will have allies, that you build up this long-lasting relationship. And it's unprecedented, I would say, like in any Total War games you've ever done before. We did look for inspiration, but we we weren't happy with any of the solutions, so we decided to develop our own solution.
and
just like it's based on the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, like the novel, for example, and the records, we felt like that's the base reference for us instead of anything
To
else.
your first point, yes, basically, with Three Kingdoms and the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, just the level of interpersonal interactions, relationships. You know, at this point, China was whole, and then it split apart and got fragmented. You know, it's one country, one nation. You have, separated friends, families. Everyone essentially knows each other, right, from the major players. So this kind of interpersonal relationship and history, is super important, definitely.